prolong seed shelf life, and by prolonging seed shelf life, can we maintain the quality of the seeds was my major objective. So this longevity or seed longevity in terms and other terms called as seed shelf life or storability, right? So it is nothing but the ability of the seeds to store for certain period of time, right? So when you produce a seed lot or a seed product, when you produce a seeds, you store them, right? And when you store them, they start to deteriorate. But there are certain seed types where they can be stored quite well. And this combination of seeds and also the environment to which they respond depends on many things like the genetics, the quality and time of the collection of seeds, and treatment between collection and storage, how you handle the seeds between the seed production time and storage. And the conditions at storage are quite important because the seeds which you produce are stored for certain time period before they are released into the market or before the demand is seen, right? So this is one of the pictures from a seed warehouse where you have seeds stored in open conditions. There you don't have any control of the moisture or in the sense relative humidity on temperature. But in seed companies, they store at 30% RH and 20 degrees Celsius. They have a facility where they can put the seeds under constant condition. And in gene banks, 15% RH minus 20 degrees Celsius. Can anyone say what is the difference here? Of course, here there is no control and these two are highly controlled. But can you realize what is the most economical part in these type of storage? Space, of course, yeah. Space for rice and wheat, it will take huge. In vegetables, in small, you cannot afford it, so it is not affordable. But one of the important thing is you have to maintain the temperature and RH. So you spend a lot of money on maintaining the RH, and so the cost of the seeds increases, right? So it's quite important that you do certain genetic manipulation or you do certain things where you have less response of seeds to changing environments, right? That is one of the possible approaches. So for seed longevity, there are variation in species. Like say for example, if you plot what is the viability fall from 98% to 85% in different species under the condition of minus 20 degrees and 50% RH. So you will see that these are quite sensitive and they have less storage potential when compared to the sorghum bicolor, which has like more than 6,000 years of, they can be stored at this condition for more than 6,000 years, right? So this is the beauty of the response of crop plants to the environment, the storage condition, right? So did you get one point that the seeds which are stored in any condition, they respond to the environment? And two major determinants are the RH and then the temperature, okay? So if you increase the RH and if you increase the temperature, then the seeds live for less time or they don't long last, right? So you got the definition of seeds. Say for example, in this case, in rice, if you store seeds at 10% RH and 14% RH, there is 3%, not RH, it's moisture content, 10% moisture content and 14% moisture content. Just 3% decrease in moisture content or increase in moisture content. You can see the time taken for 50% reduction in germination is maybe here 160, 170 days. But in seeds which are having 10% moisture content, they can be stored very easily for around 400 days, right? So this is the effect of moisture. Likewise, you have also a temperature effect, and the seeds also respond to the complex nature of temperature and moisture condition. So in rice, see, for example, this is how genotypes respond to different storage conditions. Here in this, same different genotypes under same storage condition, they respond differently. So this is a standard survivor curve for any crop species. So when you refer any research papers, you will have this type of graphs where they see what they have done is, this is the storage period in days, and this each dot is the sampling time point. So you have a seed lot, people go there, they sample maybe around 400 seeds, they put for germination and they record percentage seeds germinated, and they plot what is the germination. So when you move along the x-axis, that is days, the germination comes down, of course, because the seeds are aging, right? And say for example, here there are different genotypes of rice, and the genotype here, they will have less P50 values. P50 is nothing but the time taken for this seed lot to reduce to 50% of the germination, right? Likewise, in this, the black square here, they will have more P50 value because they have a good interaction between the seed genotype and the storage condition. Here it is 60% RH and 45 degrees Celsius, right? And then if you have to look at the variation, you can simply make a box plot and you see what is the variation between these genotypes. So this is how seed longevity is studied, right? Are you with me? Yeah? Okay, so let us go ahead. So when we started our project, we were thinking, like we have to study seed longevity because it's quite important for maintaining quality of seeds, right? If your quality is good, then you have more business. Then we started to look in literature what is known about the genetics of seed quality in rice. So there are a lot of reports. It is not that very new that people have not studied the genetic basis of seed longevity in rice. But when we had a look, most of the genetic studies are derived from biparental mapping population. So these mapping population in most of these studies were crossed between Indica and Japonica types. So they took the best storing and a poor storing genotype. They crossed, they made a segregation population, maybe RILs, backcross inbred lines, NILs, and they did the statistical analysis to identify the QTL. And they came up with one of the most prominent QTL called as QSS9. So this is on chromosome number 9. QSS is for seed storability, QTL for seed storability, and 9. And most of these reports which are available for seed longevity in rice have reported this QTL to be having quite profound effect on the storability. And one of the authors, they have fine mapped this QTL region because this QTL region are quite big, and in this QTL region you can find many number of genes, and you cannot pinpoint to which genes are responsible. Rather, you can say this QTL is responsible. But they have found that trehalose 6-phosphatase is involved, which is involved in anaerobic germination tolerance, is quite important for storability, giving tolerance to storability. And this part of the gene is coming from the Indica population. That means that Indica is the best or good storer and Japonica is poor storer, right? So in rice, I think you should know that what are different subgroups. You have Indica, you have Japonica, you have OS type, and you have other two types. So I will not go into that. But on a nutshell, they have identified these type of QTL, which is prominent on chromosome 9, and they have come to a conclusion that this could be a possible player in giving tolerance for this. But interestingly, all these seed longevity studies, see, I have showed in one of my graph that when you store seeds at 10% moisture content, you will have 400 days. Say for example, if I start to do research on rice seeds which are stored at 10%, then I will maybe complete my PhD in 10 years, 15 years. That is not feasible. So what researchers do is, they adopt a technique called as moist aging test. In other terms, it is also called as accelerated aging test or controlled deterioration test. I don't know if anyone have come across these tests, but these are quite, these are the tests which can promote aging, in the sense when you keep at high moisture, that is at high moisture, high relative humidity and high temperature, the seeds die faster. So that thereby you can capture the variation in this segregating population, and then you can arrive at the QTLs. So that is the basic principle. We thought that, like, wait, these tests which we are doing is at high moisture and high temperature condition. But when you go to a warehouse, it's never more than 90% and it's not more than 35, 38 degrees. So we said, why we should do this type of aging, keeping them at high moisture, high temperature? Why do we have an alternative? But when we digged out the literature, we found that whatever the seeds which deteriorate over time, most important process in them is oxidation. Oxidation in the sense, oxygen which is there in the gaseous environment around the seeds, they produce ROS, reactive oxygen species. So these are highly reactive molecules. By theory, it is known that these reactive molecules interact with the membranes and macromolecules like DNA, RNA, and also proteins, and they cause the inactivation of these enzyme systems or the macromolecules, and thereby seeds they lose the viability over time. So this is not a just one go reaction, but it is slowly over the time. And in the seeds, you can imagine that there are many number of tissues. So you have endosperm, you have embryo, you have the seed coat. So it's dynamic. So you have you find differences for different species, right? So we are just concentrating on one species, that is rice, and the indica population. Okay. So then we said, okay, do we have an alternate method? Can we find certain alternate where we can mimic the natural storage conditions? And also from the cues from literature that oxygen has a determinantal effect. Okay, we arrived at a test. Say for example, in rice, under 40% RH, in the sense the RH in the room is 40%, seeds will have also 40% RH, right? Why? What makes seeds to behave that way? Because seeds are hygroscopic, right? In the sense, say for example, if you have a fresh biscuit taken out from a biscuit packet, and maybe in the rainy season you keep for maybe 2 hours, and if you then try to taste it, what will happen to the biscuit? It will become soft rather than which is crisp, right? So the same principle, rice also being hygroscopic, they absorb moisture from the air. So this is the moisture in the air, and at 20 degrees Celsius, say here up to maybe around 400 plus days, it takes 400 plus days to reduce from 100% to 50%, right? But when you keep the same seed lot at 75% RH and 35 degrees, so you are increasing a small bit of RH and also the temperature. So here you can see within 3-4 days, the seeds have lost the germination. So this is how the seeds respond. And maybe if you take another genotype, maybe it can last for 10 days, maybe 15 days. So if you take 100 genotypes, then they will have different type of P50 values or seed longevity periods, right? So P50 is one of the good measure, and which in each time point, say for example, you sample maybe at around 200 days, you go to a research lab, you sample all the 100 genotypes, take out maybe 400 seeds and do a germination test, and all the 100 will have different behavior, right? Or it's few can have same behavior, few will have different behaviors. So this is how you phenotype for seed longevity. So as I said, this is under dry condition, and this is under the condition which I explained, high moisture, high temperature. There you can see that enzymatic activity is quite high, and under the dry condition you have very less enzymatic activity. The beauty of orthodox seeds or many of the cultivated crop species is that they can be harvested, they can be dry to as low as 5% moisture content, they can be stored well. But in nature it is not that way, because in nature maybe if you find a big tree which is giving seeds, it has to go through also, like if you have rainfall on some day, it is 100%. So it has to protect itself. It is not that it will start germinating. So it has its own different sensing behavior. So that is also happening in the crop species, right? So that's why seeds are able to lose moisture during seed maturation, and they keep dry so that they can last longer. And irrespective of the period, you will have a small amount of reactions going on in the seeds. Say maybe in gene bank condition you have very slow rate of reactions, maybe under the warehouse you have much faster rate of reactions, mainly the oxidation reactions, right? As I earlier said, that this is the free radical aging theory, where you have reactive oxygen species, and these cause different type of damages, and these cause also aging diseases. Many pathological diseases also linked to the Ross theory of aging. You can find more on the internet. I will not go much deeper into this. So a simple experiment we did in our lab is that these celery seeds, very small seeds, high vegetable salad, this vegetable is used for salad purpose in European countries. What we did is we used these pelleted seeds, because these seeds are quite small, so they pellet the seeds so that they can use for precision planting in the field. We did store these seeds similar to gene bank condition, like minus 20 degrees. Take the seeds, seal in aluminum pouches, put them in minus 20 degree freezer. After 3 weeks, you come again, take out the sample and put for germination. All the seeds are happily living and they produce small plants or seedlings, right? But when you put the same seeds, not this time under minus 20 but under 35 degrees in a closed jam jars, and keep it at 35 degrees. After 3 weeks you come, none of the seeds germinating. That means that the oxygen in this hair, in this, they are reacting to these seeds and they cause damage to the seeds, right? But luckily, another important thing is you take same setup, but this time you add a oxygen absorber. You find this in many food industry. When you purchase certain high quality sweets, you will find these type of small pouches. You will have silica gel maybe when you purchase a laptop or something. Why? Because silica gel absorb moisture. Likewise, these oxygen absorbers, these are nothing but iron molecules, iron powder. So what they do is, since oxygen is reacting to iron, they form ferrous oxides, and this is how they reduce the concentration of oxygen. See the greatest difference here. The seeds, even though kept at 35 degrees for 3 weeks, they germinate. That by this simple experiment, we could prove that oxygen has such a negative effect on the seeds, right? Okay, taking also cues from this, we developed a rice aging method. I will not go much into detail, but believe me, when you keep different rice seed lots under elevated partial pressure of oxygen, the seeds age quite fast. And this is at 40% TRH. 40% TRH means it's quite dry, and not at 75% TRH. So we are aging the seeds at dry condition using high concentration of oxygen. Okay, so in 7 weeks you can see almost all there is 15% or less than 20% of mean value for germination, right? So I think by now you are convinced that oxygen has a negative effect on seeds, and oxygen aging seeds by elevated partial pressure of oxygen can give different longevity values. Yeah, are you with me? You have any doubts? Just you can ask. Okay, let's move on. So we thought, well, we have now a nice method to phenotype seeds for aging, because you can see here previously at each time point you have different values for germination. So then we asked ourselves, okay, well, we have nice aging method, what next? Can we do some genetic studies with it? Then we brainstormed we had a long discussion, and we said that let us use certain mapping population which people have used. We did not get those mapping population, but luckily we had the mapping population in IRRI, because we had an active collaboration with the IRRI gene bank storage, gene bank facility there in the IRRI. So they said, okay, well, we have developed a good number of mapping population. We have maybe a combination of 10 different mapping parental lines, but there was no genomic resources for it. So if we had to work on it, then we had to genotype them, sequence them, then we had to use those for our QTL mapping. So it was quite a thing. Then we thought, do we have an alternative approach? Then we said, yes, we have. Why not we can use the natural variation through GWAS. So here in where we started to work on, let us use the natural population from the all over the world, because since this trait is yet complex, but there are showing good natural variation, and what we decided is, let us work on the 3000 resequenced genotypes. So we bought around 300 different rice genotypes, and we did a GWAS, but I will come to that later. But before that, do you know anything basic about GWAS? I think you should, in this training, you should have given some information, or maybe more information on GWAS, right? So can anyone just give brief what is GWAS and what is the principle behind it? Don't worry if you are wrong. It's not. Just say what all principle it gives. It takes into account in detecting the QTLs or gene. Yeah, big population. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the approaches, you have SNP data and you have the phenotype data, and you apply a statistical approach, and then you come to a conclusion where you have statistically prominent SNPs connected to the trait of interest. So that is the simple principle, right? But the advantage of GWAS over the biparental population is that in biparent population, your variation is just restricted to 2 parents. It cannot be more, right? In some cases, yes, it can, heterosis can influence also the trait, but you are restricted in this case. But in natural population, you can find huge variation for such a variation, right? So we focus on allied germplasm, and this germplasm having the genomic resources, so we can really with involving no cost, we can get the SNP data and we can run a GWAS. But GWAS, the pipeline is that you have phenotype data based on the experimental design. You collect phenotype data, you transform it so that it will have variation, continuous variation for the trait, and you connect it to the genotype or the SNP data by taking into the kinship matrix or Q matrix population values, and you do a association analysis. And it's nowadays it's quite popular technique usually used where you have a good genomic data set. So in a study design, GWAS can have like case control study or quantitative in case of monogenic trait, say for example some diseases. So you will genotype the case and the control, say without having any disease, with some disease, and you will find which are the genes which are having variants, and thereby you can say that this gene or this SNP has a direct relation to the trait of interest. Okay. Likewise, in cohort studies, like you follow certain set of population, and within those population over time, some are resistant, some are sensitive, then you will say, okay, what is the difference between these tolerant and sensitive ones, and then you come up statistically and you say these are the genomic regions which are responsible for certain trait. Okay, likewise, this theory has a simple regression analysis. Okay, it applies simple regression models. Say for example, at a SNP point, you have maybe a SNP called as A in certain number of individuals in a population, and a SNP T on certain number of individuals in that given population. So you can fit what is the trait value for these two variants, allele variants. Then say for example, if you are measuring seed size, say a variant A might, all the individuals which is having variant A might give certain phenotypic value, seed size maybe 10 mm, and another variant T which is on the same SNP in other individuals, they have a mean value maybe around 2. So the difference will result in a higher p value. So the difference is very conspicuous or very significant. So thereby you can say that this SNP is related to seed size. Okay, so that is how this principle is based. So you have a null hypothesis here where you say that there is no variation, and you have an alternative hypothesis. Based on the significance of p value, you will say whether you accept or reject the null hypothesis. Okay. And reasons for association could be two types. One is you have causal variant direct relationship, where you have this SNP directly related to the trait of interest. Say for example, this SNP T and C related to seed size. But you can also come across certain linkage types where you have the SNP identified away from the gene or away from the causal gene, and thereby you can identify the SNP. So there are two approaches. But here in my study, I will show you how we have a direct relationship with the seed longevity trait in rice. Yeah. So we started to then continue our research on genetics of seed longevity, but this time using the natural population. And all this population of rice came from different parts of rice growing areas in the world, and majorly it's from India, India and China and adjoining areas. This SNP data you can freely download from the SNP-seq database. If you go here in the downloads of the SNP-seq database, you can download the 404K SNP data, or what I used is 1 million GWAS data set, because with the computing speed which I had, I can handle only 1 million GWAS. So if it has also 18 million, 24 million SNP database, but you need more computing power to handle those data. So it's also relatively same procedure is same, right? You download the data from the 3K rice genome, and it has you can use those. You can remove the common monomorphic SNPs, and you can work on the SNP data which is generated. In my case, I had around 1,28,667 SNP, right? What we did for our phenotyping is we got the seed material from the rice gene bank. We aged them under high pressure oxygen, and we phenotyped the germination. Imagine that there are 300 different type of natural population or accessions, and we put under the control. The control is without any oxygen, and the treatment is with high oxygen. So we knew that with high oxygen, the seeds aged faster, right? So you can see the variation here. This is total seed germination, and in the control treatment you see at 0 days it has hardly lost, at 21 days no much variation in the, but in the EPO condition or EPO aging, the high elevated partial pressure of oxygen, you can see that the genotype had a varied and a huge variation for total seed germination. And in this example, you can see that under this treatment, you have certain seeds which are germinating well, but certain seeds which have already lost substantial variation for germination, or they have lost viability substantially, right? So now we were very happy and we went through the jivas. Can anyone say how to read this graph? Yeah, this is the threshold, but what is on the x-axis is the chromosome, and each dot is a SNP. So here I have used 1,28,000 something SNP. So I have 1,28,000 SNP, and this is the negative log p value. Okay, so and you can say if you set a threshold and if the SNPs are above, then you can with high probability say that this SNP has been linked to the trait of interest. In this case, aging and high oxygen, right? And luckily we found that on chromosome 7 we had a very nice peak here, and this is the significant peak, and in control we did not have any response of these individuals or accessions for the aging, right? So this was the likely candidate. So then we thought, well, we have a nice SNP which is there in our study, but what next? So where is this SNP? How to identify this? Can anyone just guess? Well, you know already, because this is already the genome which is sequenced. So you can go back to the Rise Genome Browser. Okay, so you can go back to the Rise Genome Browser and you can say chromosome 7 and this SNP. It will give what is the SNP. But what you have to do earlier is, because this SNP is a result of a natural population, so it is coming from individuals of different background. So you have to look into the linkage decay. So you have to look into this population where their SNP is having linkage to different other SNPs across it. So we do a LD analysis, or linkage disequilibrium analysis. And there, when you do, what you do in LD analysis is you have this significant SNP. You take 200 kb upstream and 200 kb downstream, and you take the SNPs and you derive the pairwise R square value, and this is what you get. So you will get a region where 400 kb is reduced to maybe 50 kb. And in this 50 kb you have here 3 genes. And this significant SNP here is on this gene, and this gene is nothing but RC gene. So this RC is nothing but red color gene, and this is responsible for the proanthocyanidin synthesis in rice. Have you seen seeds with rice red color? And have you seen whatever we eat on daily basis, those are white rice, right? So yet white rice, when the pericarp is removed during processing, you will lose much of the proanthocyanidins there. So these proanthocyanidins are synthesized by a BHLH transcription factor. So this RC gene, which is around 6,000 base pairs, it is a master regulator for the proanthocyanidin. I will come across that. And if you look at so at this significant SNP, you have 2 options for alleles. So either you should have A here or G. Okay. So all the individuals with A allele, they had on average high total germination value, and with G allele they had very or lower total seed germination value. So this is highly significant, and the p value you can see it's quite high, quite low here, right? So the negative log p value is quite low. So that is how you decide that this SNP is directly related to the total seed germination in this study. So now, okay, so what makes this? Now the question is, okay, how does this SNP which we identified is related to the red color or white color? So what we did is we did a multiple sequence alignment, and there are many available software you can do clustral EMBO website, you can do a multiple sequence alignment. And what we did is we took a sequence of Oryza rufipogon, the wild relative, which has a red color seed pericarp, and we took one of the sequence from which had red color pericarp and white color pericarp, and we aligned, and we luckily found that these white pericarp had a 14 base pair deletion on the exon 7, which makes it a protein which is non-functional. So those genes which have those individuals which have RC gene with 14 base pair deletion, they did not end up in giving red pericarp color, but they were white pericarp color. Likewise, all those individuals have intact 14 base pair deletion, they produced red pericarp color seeds. So these seeds in the sense had higher total germination when compared to the white pericarp seeds during aging. So how does this, what is the role of RC gene? So just have a glimpse. What does this RC gene do is it will form a complex of MBW and MYB. WD40, these are 3 different transcription factors, and these transcription factor form a complex, and they initiate or switch on the phenol propanoid pathway by synthesizing the structural genes involved in this pathway. Okay. Say for example, in this case, all those red pericarp which had the functional gene, they could initiate this pathway, and thereby the seeds would accumulate good number of proanthocyanidins in them. And those which did not have 14 base pair, they did not have functional protein, so they did not form the complex, and thereby they did not initiate the phenol propanoid pathway, and then finally ended up in having no red color in the seeds. Right? Are you with me? So what next? So how will you do functional validation? Yeah, knockout. Yes, very good. Yeah. Why cannot you use one of those which have in this study, one which had the functional and non-functional? Why don't you think we could prove that as a functional validation? Because these 2 individuals will have different genetic background, so they are not isogenic to them, right? So maybe there is other factors other than RC gene which can also influence the longevity trait. So we said, okay, now functional validation, how? Can anyone say? We could just go for tDNA mutants, developing some tDNA mutants, or maybe CRISPR-Cas. Just go knock out certain promoter regions, and then you can knock out the function of this gene. But you know, in Europe, transgenics are highly regulated. So if you are dealing with transgenic seeds, then you have different handling procedures. So we do not want that. So what I did is we then went to the literature and we saw what all does this RC gene do. But luckily we found a group, Xingyu Gu from South Dakota State University in US. They were working on this gene, and they had already developed the isogenic lines of this gene. So what we did is we requested the lines from them. They were very happy to share with us, and then we bought them. And what does these are 2 isogenic lines, and let me just give a small background about these isogenic lines. The red pericarp or the RC gene was integressed from the wild type genotype into the cultivated rice cultivar, right? And by repeated backcross breeding, okay? And we could see that this isogenic line which had the functional RC gene, they gave up red pericarp color, but outer this one is normal, it is yellow or just straw color, but this one was having less accumulation of proanthocyanidins because it lacked. So here these 2 isogenic lines have the same background, they differ only for this gene, okay, and the 2 this 14 base pair deletion. So this was ideal material for us to functionally say that then what to do next. After getting this, what we did is we grew them under the same conditions at our facility. Then we aged them under our treatment, and you can see that this is the LCMS analysis of the proanthocyanidin, just to show that this accumulated lot of course, color in itself indicates that it has proanthocyanidins, but we wanted to be sure whether the color is only because of proanthocyanidins or a combination of other compounds. So it was very black and white here. And we saw that those red color seeds, this one, they had resistance to aging under our test. And these, say for example, initially like 42 days, when this is having more than 95% germination, they are having 70-75% germination, right? Like on 49 day, you can see this still are having around 90% germination, and this have come less than 50%. So this was a very straightforward example of how you can prove that this single gene is responsible for storage, yeah, conferring the tolerance for storability. So coming to conclusions, like storage, we generally don't take into consideration this, like storage atmosphere is quite, who is going, just put the seeds, just take care that insects are not eating away the seeds, and seed is having good quality, but that is not true. But I think you will appreciate by now that how gaseous environment is also equally important for the storage behavior. And our method of high pressure oxygenasing under more dry conditions more mimic the warehouse storage conditions. And GWAS, from these studies you would appreciate that GWAS is quite a powerful tool where you can directly land onto the gene level, and you can confirm how GWAS can identify certain candidate genes. And functional RC gene protects seeds during storage. So seeds which are having red color, they have longer viability, thus good quality. And increasing longevity helps in maintaining seed quality. So just 4 or 5 take-home message. I think by now you should be clear how genomic approaches can help you solve certain issues. So I would like to thank my group there in Wageningen University, my supervisor Stephen Groot and my professor Gherkov, and the metabolomics group. We did a lot of studies with the metabolomics, but I did not cover anything on metabolomics here. And the germplasm which we received from IRRI, like they were a rich resource for our study. And also the data, the SNP data which were publicly shared, and the way we used, it was, I should appreciate their efforts. And Xingyu Gu, they shared the isogenic lines of this gene, important gene, and there we could do some functional analysis that was highly appreciated. And I got the funding from the Education Division ICR under ICR International Fellowship. I appreciate that, and also from Wageningen Seed Center and the division. And I should thank the organizers here for giving me an opportunity to share my research with you. Thank you very much. So if you people need any help with regard to GWAS, I'm there to help you. I'll be happy to help you out.
Yeah,
you can.
They have had a session on GWAS, I think. They all had a practical session, right?
Okay.
You can, now you have the confidence to do it yourself, or like Ranjit had a.
Ranjit is a good person. He is also having good knowledge on
Do you
GWAS.
have any queries? Clarification it is done?
Yeah, I will take if you have any questions. So you can also write me on this email. I have given also in the write-up in the manual. So
The faculty at IRA is the most easily accessible and most responsive faculty. So anybody will go for any help anytime, they'll help you. Okay. So yeah, any queries?
Sir, we are now starting our work, so we will be handling different populations. So, what are the minimum care we should take to keep our seed material say viable?
I think keeping dry and cool is, I don't know which crop you are referring to.
I'm working on bitter gourd.
Bitter gourd.
So,
Bitter gourd are quite challenging to, they are quite big seeds.
yes,
And I think they are, I think storing them, and they are quite oily. So if you have more oil content, that means the seeds age fast. So you have to be very careful in handling the bitter gourd seeds. So don't store them open in fridge. Never do that, because in fridge you will have good amount of moistures and seeds can absorb, mold growth can exist, and these type of things can happen. So store them dry, dry the seeds to the recommended moisture content, 10%, less 8-9%. Then seal them in a polythene pouch, keep it. I think those are good. So I hope you people got the glimpse of how you can solve certain. So if you have any questions, you can write me also, right? So otherwise, let us stop here. Yeah? Thank you very much.